Jimi Hendrix versus the establishment. The night he proved everyone wrong. The outsider's dream. The year was 1966, and the music industry was a fortress of tradition and gatekeepers. In New York City, a young black guitarist named Johnny Allen Hendrix, who would soon become known as Jimi Hendrix, walked the streets with a battered Fender Stratocaster and a dream that seemed impossible to everyone but himself. The establishment had already rejected him countless times. Record labels had turned him away. Managers had dismissed him as too unconventional. Critics had written him off as just another struggling musician trying to make it in a city that chewed up dreamers and spat them out. Jimi had arrived in New York from Seattle with nothing but his guitar and an unshakable belief that he had something the world needed to hear. He had played in various bands, backed up established artists, and performed in small clubs in Greenwich Village, but recognition remained elusive. The music industry of the mid-1960s was dominated by a specific formula: clean-cut bands, predictable song structures, and a clear understanding of what good music should sound like. Jimi's vision didn't fit that mold. His approach was revolutionary. He wanted to bend the guitar, make it scream, make it sing in ways that had never been heard before. The establishment had rules. Electric guitars were meant to be played in a certain way. Rock and roll had boundaries. And a black musician from the Pacific Northwest certainly wasn't going to be the one to break through those barriers. That's what the gatekeepers believed. That's what the record executives whispered in their offices. That's what the critics wrote in their columns. But Jimi knew something they didn't. He knew that music was a language that transcended all the artificial limitations people tried to impose on it. He knew that the guitar could be more than an instrument. It could be a voice, a weapon, a tool for revolution. Every night, in those small clubs and cramped venues, he was developing his craft, pushing boundaries, experimenting with feedback, distortion, and techniques that would later become legendary. His life during this period was a constant struggle. He lived in poverty, moving from apartment to apartment, sometimes sleeping on friends' couches. He worked odd jobs to support himself while pursuing his music. The rejection was relentless. But with each no, Jimi's determination grew stronger. He wasn't playing music to please the establishment. He was playing music because it was the only thing that made sense to him, the only way he could express the depth of his soul. The turning point came when Chas Chandler, the bassist of the Animals, saw Jimi perform at a small club in Greenwich Village. Chandler recognized something that the establishment had missed: raw, undeniable talent combined with an innovative spirit that could change music forever. Chandler became Jimi's manager and mentor, and together they began to plot a strategy that would force the music industry to pay attention. If you're inspired by stories of underdogs who refuse to give up on their dreams, please subscribe to our channel for more incredible music histories and inspiring tales of artists who changed the world. By late 1966, Chas Chandler had secured a record deal for Jimi with Polydor Records in the United Kingdom. The plan was bold: introduce Jimi to the British music scene first, build momentum, and then bring him back to America as an established artist. This strategy was necessary because the American establishment was too entrenched, too resistant to change. But in Britain, there was a different energy, a younger generation of musicians and fans who were hungry for something new, something that would push rock and roll into uncharted territory. Chandler assembled a band around Jimi, Noel Redding on bass and Mitch Mitchell on drums. Together, they formed the Jimi Hendrix Experience. The name itself was a statement. This wasn't just a band. It was an experience, something that would transcend the traditional concert format. The establishment remained skeptical. Music critics in both Britain and America questioned whether Jimi could sustain a career. Some dismissed him as a gimmick, a novelty act who played with his teeth and set his guitar on fire. They couldn't see past the showmanship to recognize the musicianship underneath. The guitar establishment, the old guard of rock and roll, viewed Jimi's techniques as disrespectful to the instrument. How dare he use feedback as a musical element? How dare he play with such aggression and innovation? How dare he suggest that the guitar could be something more than what they had already defined it to be? Record executives were cautious. They wanted to see if Jimi could actually sell records, if audiences would embrace his music, or if it would be too avant-garde, too strange for mainstream consumption. Radio stations were hesitant to play his music. His first single, Hey Joe, was considered too raw, too different from what was currently dominating the charts. But something unexpected happened. The British audience embraced Jimi. Young musicians saw in him a kindred spirit, someone who was willing to break the rules, to experiment, to push music forward. Fans responded to his authenticity and his undeniable talent. Hey Joe began to climb the charts. Suddenly, the establishment couldn't ignore him anymore. However, the real test was coming. The American music industry, the most powerful and most resistant to change, was watching. They were waiting for Jimi to fail, waiting for this novelty act to fade away. The establishment had already decided what American rock and roll should be, and Jimi Hendrix didn't fit their vision. Jimi knew this. He felt the weight of expectation and skepticism. But he also felt something else, a burning desire to prove that music could be more than what the gatekeepers had defined it to be. He was preparing for a moment that would change everything, a performance that would force the establishment to acknowledge his genius, whether they wanted to or not. The stage was being set for a confrontation between artistic vision and commercial convention, between innovation and tradition, between one man's dream and an entire industry's resistance to change. What do you think about artists who challenge the status quo? Leave a comment below and tell us about your favorite musician who broke the rules and changed their genre forever. June 18, 1967. The Monterey Pop Festival in California was supposed to be a celebration of the counterculture movement, a gathering of the biggest names in rock and roll. The establishment had already decided who the stars were. The Who, Jefferson Airplane, Otis Redding, and others who had already proven themselves in the American market. Jimi Hendrix was scheduled to perform, but he was positioned as a supporting act, not a headliner. The gatekeepers still didn't believe he was ready for the big stage. Jimi arrived at Monterey with a specific goal, to prove that he belonged among the elite musicians of his generation. He knew that this festival would be watched by industry insiders, critics, and music fans across the country. This was his chance to make a statement that couldn't be ignored. The night of his performance, Jimi took the stage with a confidence that belied the years of rejection and struggle. The crowd was curious, but not necessarily convinced. They had come to see established stars, not an unknown guitarist from Seattle. But from the first note, something magical happened. Jimi's fingers moved across the fretboard with a precision and creativity that seemed almost superhuman. The sounds coming from his guitar were unlike anything the audience had ever heard. He bent notes in ways that seemed to defy the laws of physics. He created feedback that was musical, that was intentional, that was part of the composition rather than a mistake to be avoided. He played with his teeth. He played behind his back. He played with his guitar held in unconventional positions. But none of this was showmanship for its own sake. Every technique served the music. Every innovation had a purpose. The crowd was mesmerized. The establishment critics who were watching began to realize that they had been wrong. This wasn't a gimmick. This wasn't a novelty act. This was a musician of extraordinary talent, someone who had expanded the possibilities of what the electric guitar could do. But the moment that truly proved everyone wrong came near the end of his set. Jimi performed Wild Thing, a simple three-chord song that had been a hit for the Trogs. In the hands of most musicians, it would have been a straightforward rock and roll number. But Jimi transformed it. He bent the opening notes in a way that made the crowd gasp. He played with such intensity and creativity that the simple song became a masterpiece of guitar innovation. And then, in a moment that would become legendary, Jimi set his guitar on fire. It wasn't a stunt, it was a statement. It was Jimi saying to the establishment, "You tried to contain me, to limit me, to tell me what I could and couldn't do with this instrument. But I am free. My music is free. And I will burn down every boundary you've tried to place around art and creativity." The crowd erupted. The establishment was forced to acknowledge what they had been denying. Jimi Hendrix was not just a musician. He was a revolutionary. He had taken the electric guitar and transformed it into something that had never existed before. He had proven that innovation, creativity, and authenticity could triumph over convention and gatekeeping. The performance at Monterey Pop Festival was the moment when the establishment's resistance crumbled. Record labels that had rejected him suddenly wanted to sign him. Radio stations that had been hesitant to play his music began to add his songs to their playlists. Critics who had dismissed him as a novelty began to write about him with respect and admiration. But more importantly, Jimi had proven something to himself. He had proven that his vision was valid, that his approach to music was not just acceptable, but revolutionary. He had shown that an outsider, someone who didn't fit the mold, someone who had been rejected by the establishment, could force that establishment to recognize genius when it was undeniable. This performance changed music history forever. If you enjoyed learning about this incredible moment, please like this video and help us reach more people who love music history and inspiring stories of artistic triumph. The aftermath of Monterey Pop Festival was transformative for Jimi Hendrix. Within months, he had become one of the most celebrated musicians in the world. His album, Are You Experienced?, was released and became a massive commercial and critical success. Songs like Purple Haze, Foxy Lady, and The Wind Cries Mary became classics that would influence generations of musicians. But the significance of Jimi's triumph went far beyond commercial success. He had fundamentally changed what was possible in rock and roll. He had expanded the vocabulary of the electric guitar. He had shown that innovation and experimentation were not threats to music, but essential elements of its evolution. He had proven that an artist didn't need to fit the establishment's definition of success to achieve greatness. The establishment that had rejected him was forced to adapt. Record labels began to look for artists who were willing to take risks, who had something unique to say. Radio stations expanded their playlists to include more experimental music. Critics became more open to innovation and less dogmatic about what good music should sound like. The gatekeepers realized that their job wasn't to prevent change, but to recognize and nurture talent, even when that talent didn't fit their preconceived notions. Jimi's success also had profound implications for the music industry's approach to diversity and inclusion. He was a black musician in an industry that had historically marginalized black artists. He was an outsider in a system that preferred to work with people who fit a certain mold. His triumph demonstrated that talent and authenticity transcended race, geography, and social status. It showed that the best way forward for the music industry was to be open to diverse voices and perspectives. In the years following Monterey, Jimi continued to push boundaries. He experimented with different musical styles, collaborated with other artists, and constantly evolved as a musician. He never became complacent or satisfied with repeating past successes. He remained true to his vision of music as a form of freedom and expression. Tragically, Jimi's life was cut short when he died in 1970 at the age of 27. But in his brief time on Earth, he had fundamentally transformed music. He had shown that one person, armed with talent, determination, and an unwillingness to accept limitations, could change the world. The lesson of Jimi Hendrix's story is profound and timeless. It teaches us that the establishment's resistance to change is often based on fear and a lack of imagination. It shows us that innovation and authenticity are more powerful than gatekeeping and convention. It demonstrates that an outsider's perspective can be exactly what the world needs to move forward. For creators, artists, and anyone with a vision that doesn't fit the current mold, Jimi's story is a source of inspiration. It reminds us that rejection is not a reflection of our worth or our potential. It shows us that persistence, combined with genuine talent and authenticity, can overcome any obstacle. It teaches us that the greatest achievements often come from those who are willing to challenge the status quo and forge their own path. Jimi Hendrix didn't just prove everyone wrong. He proved that everyone's limitations were their own, not his. He showed that the only real limitation is the one we accept in our minds. He demonstrated that music, like life, is meant to be lived fully, authentically, and without apology. Today, more than 50 years after his death, Jimi Hendrix remains one of the most influential musicians in history. His techniques are studied in music schools around the world. His songs are covered by countless artists across multiple genres. His approach to the guitar has inspired millions of musicians. But perhaps most importantly, his legacy reminds us that the establishment's resistance to change is temporary, while the impact of genuine innovation is eternal. The night Jimi Hendrix proved everyone wrong at Monterey Pop Festival wasn't just about one performance. It was about the triumph of vision over convention, of authenticity over gatekeeping, of one man's unwavering belief in himself over an entire industry's skepticism. It was a moment that changed music forever and continues to inspire anyone who has ever dared to dream bigger than the world told them they could. Jimmy's story is a testament to the power of believing in yourself. If this video inspired you to pursue your own dreams and challenge the status quo, please subscribe to our channel for more stories of artists, creators, and visionaries who changed the world. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss our latest content. Thank you for watching.